My name is Megan Carter. I'm 30 years old and my life completely fell apart at my dad's birthday party. Imagine this, a family gathering, laughter filling the room, and then out of nowhere my dad leaned across the table, his eyes locked on mine, and asked Megan, the $200,000 I gave you, what did you do with it? My heart skipped a beat. $200,000. I froze, the fork slipping from my hand and clattering onto the plate. What do you mean? I stammered. My sister's face went pale, her hands trembling as she tried to speak. The room sank into heavy silence. I had been given a fortune to chase my dream of opening a fashion store, but someone in my family had other plans. Betrayal from family cuts the deepest. Have you ever experienced it? Share your story in the comments. I've been grinding away in Chicago for years, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized fashion brand. It's fast-paced, pitching campaigns, chasing deadlines, and dreaming of something bigger. My dream was always to open my own boutique, a place where I could design and sell unique clothing lines. A few months back, my dad made that dream feel within reach. He wired me $800,000, no strings attached, saying it was my shot to build something of my own. I was floored. His belief in me meant everything. I'd been saving up, scouting locations in Salt Lake City, where I grew up, planning to move back and start fresh. That money was my ticket to a new life, and I wasn't about to waste it. But then, a few days ago, my sister called out of the blue. Her voice was tight, like she was reading from a script. "Dad's not feeling great," she said. "His birthday party's canceled. No need to come home. It didn't sit right." Dad's turning 60 was a big deal. He'd been talking about it for months, planning a big gathering at our family home in Sugar House. Why would he cancel without telling me himself? I pressed her, asking if he was okay, but she brushed me off, saying, "It's just a cold, don't worry." Her tone was off-rushed, like she wanted me off the phone. I hung up, a knot forming in my stomach. Something wasn't adding up. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. We've never been close. She's always been about flashy clothes and big trips, living a life I couldn't keep up with. Growing up, she'd borrow my stuff without asking, always one-upping me with her stories of exotic vacations or designer bags. I'd learned to tune her out, but this call felt different. Why lie about Dad's party? I checked my texts, nothing from him, which was weird. He's the type to call me directly, always checking in, asking about my work. If he was sick, he'd have told me himself. I started wondering if she was covering something up, maybe something bigger than a canceled party. I decided to fly back to Salt Lake City anyway. I wasn't going to miss Dad's 60th, sick or not. I wanted to surprise him with a gift, a sleek engraved watch I'd saved up for, something to show how much he meant to me. Booking the flight was a no-brainer. It's only a 3-hour trip from Chicago. As I packed, my mind kept circling back to my sister's call. Her words didn't match the dad I knew, the one who'd always been there, pushing me to chase my dreams. I pulled up my bank account to double-check my savings, feeling a surge of gratitude for the $800,000 he'd given me. But as I scrolled through my transactions, a small detail caught my eye, a transfer notification I hadn't noticed before, buried in my account history. It was vague, just a reference number, no clear sender. My heart skipped a beat. Was this connected to her call? I called my aunt, who's always been my go-to for family updates. She's sharp, doesn't miss a thing, and she's never been one for drama. "Canceled," she said, her voice skeptical. "I was at their house yesterday, and your dad was fine planning the menu for his party." My grip tightened on the phone. Why would my sister lie about something so simple? Aunt Ellen paused, then added, "You know, I saw your sister with some new designer bags last week. She's been spending a lot lately, more than usual." That hit me hard. Designer bags, trips to Europe. Her lifestyle was flashy, sure, but where was she getting the money? A quiet suspicion started to grow, one I couldn't ignore. Boarding the plane, my mind raced. I clutched the gift box with the watch, trying to focus on seeing Dad, but my sister's voice kept echoing in my head. Her lie about the party wasn't just a small fib, it felt like the tip of something much bigger. I landed in Salt Lake City and drove straight to my dad's house in Sugar House, the watch box tucked safely in my bag. As I pulled up to the familiar modern house, my jaw dropped. Cars lined the street, and warm light spilled from every window. The party wasn't canceled. My sister had lied, and I was about to find out why. Stepping inside, I was hit with the buzz of voices and clinking glasses. My dad stood by the dining room table laughing with guests looking perfectly healthy. My mom hovered near the kitchen, arranging plates, while my sister flitted around her designer heels, clicking on the hardwood floor. Aunt Ellen caught my eye from across the room, giving me a quick wave. I forced a smile, but my pulse was racing. Why had my sister tried to keep me away from this? I made my way to my dad, gripping the gift box. "Happy birthday," I said, handing him the watch. His face lit up, and he pulled me into a tight hug. "You didn't have to come all this way," he said, his voice warm. But as I stepped back, I caught my sister staring at me, her eyes wide for a split second before she turned away. My mom glanced at her, then quickly looked down, fussing with a napkin. Their behavior was off, tense, like they were hiding something. I scanned the room, noticing how they kept exchanging quick looks, their movements jittery. As the party went on, I stuck close to Aunt Ellen, who was sipping wine by the dessert table. She's always been the one I trust to cut through the family nonsense. "I thought this was canceled," I said, keeping my voice low. She raised an eyebrow, setting her glass down. "Canceled? Your dad's been planning this for weeks. Your sister's the one who said you weren't coming." My stomach twisted. So it wasn't just a lie about the party, it was about me. I pressed her, asking if she'd noticed anything strange. Aunt Ellen leaned in, her voice dropping. "Your sister's been on a spending spree lately. New designer bags, jewelry, even bragging about a trip to Paris last month. I saw her at the mall, dropping thousands like it was nothing." My mind flashed back to our call, her rushed tone, her insistence I stay in Chicago. Paris, thousands. She's always lived beyond her means, but this was next level. Where was she getting that kind of money? I glanced at my sister, who was now laughing loudly with a guest, her diamond earrings catching the light. My mom stood nearby, nodding along, but her smile looked forced, her hands fidgeting with her bracelet. I remembered Aunt Ellen's words from our call, my sister's flashy purchases, her sudden extravagance. A chill ran through me. Was she hiding something bigger? Something tied to that vague bank transfer I'd seen? I wanted to confront her right there, but the party wasn't the place. I needed more than suspicions. As I helped clear plates, my sister brushed past me, her perfume sharp. "Didn't expect you here," she muttered, barely meeting my eyes. "Thought you'd be too busy in Chicago?" Her tone was sharp, almost defensive. I bit back a reply, watching her walk away, her heels clicking faster than before. My mom avoided me entirely, busying herself with the cake. Their secrecy was palpable, like a wall between us. Aunt Ellen pulled me aside again, her expression serious. "I don't know what's going on, but your sister's been acting cagey for weeks. And your mom, she's in on it, whatever it is." My heart pounded. The pieces weren't adding up yet, but the lies, the spending, the looks they kept trading, it all pointed to something big. I clutched the edge of the table, trying to stay calm. This party was about to reveal more than just a birthday celebration. The party was in full swing, with guests chatting and music humming in the background. I stood near my dad, watching him open gifts, his laughter easing my earlier unease. But something still felt off. My sister and my mom kept their distance, their eyes darting nervously whenever I got close. I pushed the thought aside, trying to focus on the moment. Dad deserved a perfect night. As the cake was brought out, everyone gathered around the dining table. Dad stood at the head, smiling, ready to cut the first slice. I was about to raise my glass for a toast when he turned to me, his expression shifting to something serious, almost piercing. "Megan," he said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the chatter. "The $200,000 I sent you, what did you do with it?" My heart stopped. $200,000. My mind blanked and my glass slipped, nearly spilling. What do you mean? I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The room seemed to freeze, all eyes on me. I looked at Dad, his gaze steady, waiting for an answer. My throat tightened. I had no idea what he was talking about. The 800,000 for my boutique was one thing, but this, another 200,000, when how? Before I could say more, my sister Kristen, I realized I'd never called her anything else tonight, jumped in, her voice high-pitched and shaky. She probably just forgot Dad, she said, forcing a laugh. You know how busy she is in Chicago? Her hands twisted together, her face drained of color like she'd been caught in a spotlight. I stared at her, my confusion turning to a sharp pang of suspicion. Why was she so quick to cover for me? Dad raised a hand, cutting her off. Kristen, I'm asking Megan. He said, his tone sharp like a blade slicing through her words. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their murmurs fading. My mom, standing near Kristen, clutched her wineglass, her knuckles white. Aunt Ellen, leaning against the wall, watched silently, her eyes narrowing as if she'd been waiting for this moment. The air grew heavy, like a storm was about to break. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Dad, I don't know about any 200,000, I said, my voice cracking. I got the 800,000 for my boutique and I'm planning to use it, but this other money, I never saw it. My words hung in the room, each one feeling like a step towards something I couldn't unsee. Kristen's eyes widened and she opened her mouth to speak again, but Dad's glare pinned her in place. Megan, he said, his voice low and deliberate, I sent you and your sister 200,000 each, separate from the boutique money. It was for you to use however you wanted, your future, your dreams. He paused, his eyes flicking to Kristen, then back to me. You're telling me you didn't know? My stomach dropped. Separate money. For me and Kristen. I shook my head, my hands trembling. No, Dad, I swear. I never got it. I never even heard about it. My voice rose, a mix of shock and anger. How could I not know about $200,000? My eyes locked on Kristen, who was now gripping the table, her face pale as paper. She wouldn't meet my gaze, her lips pressed tight. Kristen tried again, her voice desperate. Dad, maybe there was a mix-up at the bank or something? She said, her words tumbling out too fast. You know how these things happen. But her excuse sounded hollow, and the way she avoided looking at me only deepened the knot in my chest. My mom stepped forward, her hand on Kristen's arm as if to steady her, but she said nothing, her silence louder than any words. Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with something I'd never seen before, betrayal maybe, or fury. Enough, he said, his voice like steel. Megan, you're sure you didn't know? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The room was suffocating, every guest holding their breath, watching the family unravel. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, and it was breaking right in front of me. The dining room felt like it was closing in the weight of my dad's question about the $200,000 still hanging in the air. I stood frozen, my eyes locked on Kristen, her face pale and her hands trembling. Dad's gaze shifted between us, his expression hardening as the silence grew unbearable. Guests shuffled awkwardly, their whispers barely audible over the tension. Dad took a step forward, his voice steady but laced with anger. Let me make this clear, he said, addressing the room, but looking straight at me and Kristen. I sent $200,000 to each of you, separate from the money for your boutique, Megan. It was for your futures, no questions asked. I trusted you both to use it wisely. His words hit like a hammer. My head spun. Another $200,000. For me, I'd never seen a cent of it, never even heard about it until tonight. I opened my mouth to speak, but Dad turned to Kristen, his eyes narrowing. And you, Kristen, what did you do with yours? Her lips parted, but no words came out. She glanced at Mom, who stood rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her fingers were white. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for her to answer. Finally, Kristen stammered, I used it for investments, Dad. You know smart choices. Her voice cracked and her eyes darted to the floor. Dad's face darkened. Investments. He repeated his tone sharp enough to cut glass. Then why did Aunt Ellen tell me you've been blowing money on designer clothes and trips to Europe? My heart raced as I looked at Aunt Ellen, who nodded slightly, her expression grim. Kristen's shoulders slumped and she shot a desperate look at Mom, who stepped forward, her voice shaky. "Daniel, let's not do this here." Mom said, her words pleading. "We can talk privately." Dad ignored her, his focus back on me. "Megan, you're saying you never got your share?" I nodded, my voice barely steady. "I swear, Dad, I didn't know about it. I thought the 800,000 was all you gave me." His jaw clenched and he turned to Kristen, his voice rising. "Then where's Megan's money, Kristen? Because it sure as hell didn't get to her." Kristen's face crumpled, her hands twisting her necklace. "It was a mistake," she whispered, barely audible. I thought it was mine, Dad. I didn't mean to." Her words cut off as Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. "You thought," he roared. "You took $200,000 that wasn't yours and spent it on what? Handbags, vacations." I felt a surge of anger, my hands balling into fists. All those years of Kristen's flashy lifestyle, her smug attitude, she'd been using my money. I looked at Mom, expecting her to defend me, but she just stood there, her eyes downcast, her silence deafening. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking, "did you know?" She flinched but didn't answer, her lips pressed into a thin line. Dad's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "Linda, you were in on this too, weren't you?" Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "Daniel, I didn't mean for it to go this far," she stammered. "Kristen needed help, and I thought we could fix it before anyone noticed." Fix it? My blood boiled. They'd taken my future and called it a mistake. Dad pulled out his phone, his fingers steady despite the fury in his eyes. "I'm calling the police," he said, his voice final. Kristen gasped, stepping back. "Dad, no, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. Mom grabbed his arm, her voice frantic. "Daniel, don't do this. We're family." He shook her off, his expression cold. "Family doesn't betray family. You both knew what you were doing. You're done." He dialed, his voice calm as he spoke to the dispatcher. "I need officers at my home in Sugar House. It's about theft, $200,000. The guests stood frozen, some slipping toward the door, unwilling to witness the fallout. Dad turned to Kristen and Mom, his words like ice. "You're out of my life, both of you. And you'll pay back every cent starting now." I could barely breathe as the reality sank in. My family was breaking apart, and there was no going back. The police station was cold and stark, a sharp contrast to the warmth of Dad's house. I sat in a small waiting area, my hands clasped tightly, still reeling from the chaos of the night. Dad stood nearby, his face set in stone, while Aunt Ellen flipped through a folder of papers she'd brought. Kristen and Linda were in separate rooms being questioned. The weight of what had happened pressed down on me, my family shattered in a matter of hours. An officer approached, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Ms. Carter, we've got statements from your sister and mother," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You'll want to hear this." He led us to a small room with a one-way window where I could see Kristen sitting at a metal table, her eyes red and puffy. Linda was in another room, her head bowed, hands fidgeting. My stomach churned. I wasn't ready for this, but I needed to know the truth. The officer started with Kristen. "She admitted to accessing a joint account your father set up," he said, glancing at Dad. "It held funds for you and your sister, $200,000 each. She withdrew your share a few weeks ago, claiming she thought it was hers." My breath caught. A few weeks. That explained her recent spree, the new designer coats, the trip to Milan she'd posted about online. She'd been burning through my money like it was nothing. "Did she say why?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. The officer nodded. "She said she needed to cover personal expenses, high-end clothes, plane tickets, a luxury hotel stay. Most of it's gone, maybe 10,000 left in her accounts. 10,000. My heart sank. $200,000 meant for my future reduced to scraps. I looked at Dad, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Kristen through the glass. "What about my mom?" I asked, dreading the answer. The officer flipped through his notes. Linda admitted she knew about it. She gave Kristen access to the account, thinking they could replace the money before anyone noticed. Replace it? I clenched my fists, fury rising. They'd gambled with my future, and now it was gone. Dad's hand gripped the chair, his knuckles white. "They had no right," he muttered, his voice low and raw. Aunt Ellen stepped forward, her folder open. "I've got proof," she said, handing the officer a stack of papers. Receipts from Kristen's shopping trips, thousands on handbags, jewelry, first-class tickets. "I saw her at the mall a month ago, spending like she'd won the lottery." The officer skimmed the documents, nodding. "This matches her statement," he said. "She used the money for personal purchases, no attempt to hide it once she had access." I stared at the receipts through the glass, my anger mixing with disbelief. Chanel bags, a Rolex, watch, a trip to Italy, all paid for with my money. Kristen sat there, her head in her hands, no trace of the confidence she'd shown at the party. Linda, in the other room, looked defeated, her shoulders slumped. They'd planned this together, thinking I'd never find out. The officer turned to us, his expression serious. "This is a serious offense, felony theft, second degree in Utah. They could face up to 15 years plus fines, and they'll be ordered to pay restitution." He paused, glancing at me. "With most of the money gone, though recovering it will be tough. We can seize assets, cars, jewelry, but it won't cover everything." I nodded, my throat tight. Justice sounded hollow when my money was already spent. Dad's voice broke the silence. "I want them prosecuted," he said, his tone unyielding. "They betrayed my daughter, and I won't let it slide." The officer nodded, jotting something down. "We'll move forward with charges. They'll stay here tonight, and we'll need you to provide statements." I felt a pang of guilt mixed with resolve. Kristen and Linda had made their choices, and now they'd face the consequences. As we left the room, Aunt Ellen put a hand on my shoulder, her eyes steady. "You did the right thing, Megan," she said softly. "I wasn't so sure. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. My family was gone, and so was my money. All I had left was the fight to make things right." The weeks following the police station felt like a lifetime. I sat in Dad's study in Sugar House, surrounded by familiar bookshelves, but the air was heavy with finality. Dad had called me back to meet with his lawyer, a decision that would reshape our family forever. My hands fidgeted as I waited, the reality of Kristen and Linda's betrayal still sharp in my chest. Susan Pierce, Dad's lawyer, walked in, her briefcase clicking open on the desk. "Megan Daniels made changes to his estate," she said, her voice steady and professional. "He's ready to explain." Dad sat across from me, his face etched with exhaustion, but firm. "I've rewritten my will," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "The house, the investment funds, everything goes to you. Kristen and Linda get nothing." His words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through me. The house worth over $1 million, and the funds from his real estate deals were a fortune, but inheriting it this way felt hollow. "Are you sure, Dad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his jaw tight. "They used your money without permission, Megan. They don't deserve my trust." Susan handed me the revised will, its pages crisp and final. I scanned the document, seeing my name listed as the sole beneficiary. The weight of it pressed on me, not just the wealth, but the end of any hope for reconciliation. Susan adjusted her glasses, her tone matter-of-fact. "Kristen and Linda were charged with felony theft, second degree, for taking the $200,000 from the joint account. They've both been placed on probation, 36 months. She paused, glancing at Dad. "They're also ordered to pay restitution, $200,000 to you, Megan, plus fines of $8,000 each." My stomach twisted. Restitution sounded fair, but I knew from the police that only 10,000 remained. How could they pay back what was already gone? Aunt Ellen, who joined us, spoke up, her voice calm but pointed. Kristen tried to make it right, she said, folding her arms. She sold her car, a Mercedes barely a year old, and some of her designer stuff. Handbags, jewelry, that Rolex from her Milan trip. Got about 40,000 total. 40,000. My heart sank. The math didn't add up. Even with every asset liquidated, Kristen was nowhere near covering the debt. What about Linda? I asked, dreading the answer. Aunt Ellen sighed. She's selling what she can, some jewelry, a few collectibles, maybe another 10,000 at best. I leaned back, my mind racing. $50,000 scraped together from their possessions was a fraction of what they owed. The court had seized what was left in Kristen's accounts, but it wasn't enough. Susan chimed in, her voice cutting through my thoughts. The judge issued a restitution plan, she said. They'll pay monthly based on their income, but it could take years. If they miss payments, they risk jail time, 1 to 3 years. Years. The word echoed in my head. Kristen and Linda, once fixtures in our family, now faced a future tethered to debt and consequences. Dad's voice broke the silence, low and resolute. I don't care how long it takes, he said. They made their choices. His words carried the finality of a man who'd lost faith in his wife and daughter. I looked at him, seeing the pain behind his anger. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, shattered beyond repair. Kristen and Linda had moved out of the Sugar House neighborhood, unable to face the whispers of old friends and neighbors. They'd rented a small apartment on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, a cramped place in a rundown complex far from the life they'd known. Kristen, who once flaunted her lavish lifestyle, now worked odd jobs, retail waitressing to meet her probation terms. Linda, stripped of her social standing, took a part-time clerical job, her savings drained by legal fees. Their lives had unraveled, reduced to scraping by under the weight of court orders and shame. I tried to feel something, anger, pity, anything, but all I felt was emptiness. The money was gone, and so was the family I thought I had. Aunt Ellen reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. You're stronger than this, Megan, she said softly. You'll build something new. Her words were kind, but they couldn't fill the void. Dad stood, his shoulders squared. This is your home now, he said, gesturing to the house around us. Make it yours. As I left the study, the reality settled in. The wealth was mine, but the cost was everything else. Time had a way of softening the edges of pain. Months after the fallout, I stood in the heart of Salt Lake City, staring at the sign above my new boutique, Carter's Charm. The storefront gleamed under the morning sun, its sleek windows displaying dresses and accessories I'd spent weeks curating. The $800,000 Dad had given me, his gift for my future, had turned a lifelong dream into reality. Opening a fashion store wasn't just a business move. It was my way of reclaiming what had been broken. The past year had been a whirlwind. After Dad rewrote his will, leaving me the house and his investment funds, I'd left my job in Chicago and moved back to Utah. The decision wasn't easy. Chicago had been my escape, my chance to build a life away from family drama, but Salt Lake City was home, and Dad needed me as much as I needed him. Aunt Ellen, ever the steady presence, helped me settle into the Sugar house, now officially mine. We turned it into a sanctuary filled with new memories that didn't carry the sting of betrayal. Starting the boutique took every ounce of energy I had. I poured the $800,000 into leasing a prime spot downtown, designing the interior, and sourcing unique pieces from local designers and international brands. The first few months were nerve-wracking, late nights, balancing books, learning the ropes of retail, and wondering if I'd made the right call. But slowly, customers trickled in. Fashion bloggers posted about my store, and word spread. By the 6th month, Carter's Charm was breaking even, and by the 9th, it was thriving. A feature in a local magazine called it Salt Lake's new gem, and I felt a spark of pride I hadn't known in years. Living near Dad and Aunt Ellen gave me something I hadn't expected: a family small, but real. Dad, now retired, spent his days gardening or dropping by the boutique to bring me coffee. His laughter, once rare, filled our Sunday dinners, where Aunt Ellen would share stories of her travels or tease Dad about his questionable taste in ties. We weren't perfect. Grief over what happened with Kristen and Linda lingered, but we were honest with each other. That honesty, raw and unfiltered, became our glue. I didn't hear much from Kristen or Linda anymore. The court had ordered them to pay back the $200,000 they'd taken from me, but their payments came in small, sporadic amounts. Kristen had sold her car and designer items, scraping together what she could, while Linda relied on a modest income from her clerical job. They lived quietly on the outskirts of town, their lives a shadow of what they once were. I didn't wish them harm, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. Their choices had drawn a line we couldn't cross. One evening, as I closed up the boutique, I sat at the counter sketching ideas for a new clothing line. The quiet hum of the city outside felt comforting, like a reminder that life moved on. I thought about the money, the $800,000 that gave me this chance, and the $200,000 that had torn us apart. It wasn't just about the dollars, it was about what they represented. Kristen and Linda's greed had cost them everything: family, trust, stability. Their actions showed me what happens when you let ambition twist into something selfish. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't just about loss, it was about truth. Being honest with myself, with Dad, with Aunt Ellen, had rebuilt what was broken. It wasn't easy to face the pain, to stand up to betrayal, but it was worth it. That truth carried me through the long days of building my business, through the quiet moments of doubt, and into a life I could call my own. As I locked the shop's door, I glanced at the skyline of Salt Lake City, its lights twinkling against the mountains. This was my home, my future, built on the foundation of what I'd learned. Greed destroys, but honesty endures.